The global automotive industry is on a path to significantly increase its green quotient, also necessary, especially as the Earth faces environment challenges like never before. With this as the backdrop, we bring you this special podcast with Vijay Subramanian, Global Director, CO2 Compliance, Cost and Powertrain Forecasting at IHS Markit, on the theme of the auto industry's journey towards carbon neutrality and the advancement of powertrain solutions. So Vijay, straight away, what are the key trends and focus areas in the global auto industry's move towards carbon neutrality?
Yeah, first of all, good afternoon, good morning. Thanks for this opportunity in terms of speaking to me with regards to a hot topic which is evolving around the world. If you look at the past 2 years of churn, which is being spoken about on the greenhouse gas emissions standpoint, more amount of alignment are being made to bring predominantly US and Europe and China are trying to make the pledge in terms of meeting the climate neutral. Whenever we speak about climate neutral, it's about Paris aligned goals to keep the temperature rise below 2 degrees C and restricting it at levels of 1.5 degrees C. So that's a common goal across the key nations in over different regions and also across the globe. And to a certain extent, US and Europe and China have made huge amount of commitments in terms of how they are planning to achieve it. What are the energy transition pathways they are trying to adopt, and out of which transportation is one of the biggest area of influence here. Like if you look at Europe, for example, or US, for example, 23 to 30% is a contribution from transportation. Whenever I say transportation, it's not only the auto industry; it's a wider transportation, marine, aviation, road transport. And when it comes to road transport, the contribution is quite bigger, right? This comprises of two-wheelers, rail networks, heavy duties, and light commercial vehicles as well. So and when you look at the global theme, for the 2 months back, I think it was July 14th, European Commission did lay out a plan for alignment of the climate neutral, and then they changed or they are proposing a change to the existing standards in terms of 2030 timeframe. And similarly from on the US side, Biden's administration has brought some recent proposals in terms of how they do want to approach the 2030 climate goals, which is quite aligned to 2050 net zero targets. On the other hand, China, in the month of May, I think so, they also did mention they want to hit climate neutral by 2060. Whenever I say climate neutral, it's a net zero emissions in this space.
And in terms of, say, regions like Asia and within that India, now what is the kind of powertrain mix you expect to take place in the coming years as the industry evolves?
Yeah, in terms of India in specific, right? Currently, the climate neutral goals or the net zero goals for India is more aligned towards 2030 rather than the longer term 2050, right? Pretty much, if you look at the markets like US or Europe, they have aligned it both for 2030 and also for 2050. But when it comes to India, the current goals are aligned towards 2030, expecting a 33 to 35% of overall reduction from the 2005 levels. And in terms of measurement of India, like it's an intensity measurement which is based out of GDP. And the biggest good thing about India is the contribution from the transportation sector is only 13% on the current levels, right? Like as compared to that of Europe or any other countries, right? The transportation sector is quite low. And when you look at it from the passenger car segment or from the other road transport segment, 13% is still challenging. But it requires a lot amount of changes on the powertrain options which are available for India. And when we speak about powertrain options, if you look at any other major markets here, specifically US, Europe, and China, electrification is a key enabler which brings out these achievements of goals by 2030 timeframe. And I would also expect India to move into that kind of zone pretty shortly when the targets and the standards are aligned to meet the 2030 goals.
Right. And this target of 1.5 degree centigrade of temperature rise, we are already somewhere. We have already crossed the 1 degree mark, as was pointed out by UN, and which has also kind of announced. It said that code red. It's code red for humanity now.
Yeah.
In such a scenario, eventually the automobile industry may go full electric, but that's still a long time away. But towards that, what are the key powertrain solutions you think the industry should bet on, given the kind of the market dynamics that are there, especially let's say in the West and in this part of the world?
Yeah, if you look at India in specific on this particular perspective, right? The 2030 requirements or the 2030 goals for India would lay out all your CAFE requirements. Whenever I speak about CAFE requirements, right now, if you look at India in 2017, 2018 time frame, it was under 130 grams of fleet level of CO2 reduction for passenger cars. Now, India has also laid out their future reduction targets, like the phase 2 of CAFE in this instance, which is pronouncing somewhere around 2022 timeframe, around 113 grams, right? If you look at 113 grams kind of a fleet, right, predominantly there would be an option of diesel, there would be an option of gasoline, there would be a certain levels of electrification. And whenever I speak about electrification, that's hybrid electric vehicle, plug-in vehicles, and battery electric vehicles. But that's for 2022. But if you look at a time frame like 2027 and 2030, this powertrain mix would have to eventually change, right? When you look at diesel and gasoline options, there's another other pressure angle which comes from the emission requirement, like in terms of controlling the NOx, in terms of controlling the air quality, right? So that's also seen in when you look at the markets like India, right? BS6 is already there. We would expect a BS6 revision somewhere around 2023 timeframe, and BS7 somewhere around 2027 timeframe. And pretty much all these requirements against the air quality would be aligned with the Europe requirements, right? In terms of RDE requirements or in terms of the target approach, it would be to a certain extent, it would be much more aligned. But from the CAFE standpoint, if a target like 100, even a 95 grams, which is the current target for Europe on a 2020 timeframe, if that's been put to India somewhere around 2027, that would require a lot amount of electrification. Predominantly for India market, we forecast a lot amount of hybrid electric vehicles. Because from the cost angle, that does really work well for the clients or the customer base in India. So that's how our forecast currently stands. We are not currently anticipating a lot amount of electrification or battery electric vehicle into India market until we get an indication in terms of what the targets for 2027 and 2030 are going to be. If the targets are pretty much steeper, like a 50 grams fleet or 25 grams fleet, that would eventually trigger a lot more battery electric vehicles and a lot more plug-in kind of a vehicle with the degradation of diesel and gasoline eventually.
But in the current scenario, or what is the role you see for, say, alternative fuels like CNG?
Yeah, in terms of CNG, right? CNG always comes with an infrastructure element, right? Because it requires a lot amount of infrastructure. But when you look at a climate neutral standpoint, CNG would be an option. But in terms of the overall climate neutral, the life cycle based approach of how much it is emitted, CNG and battery electric vehicle has got their own level of infrastructure requirements, right? If you compare the CNG along with the battery electric vehicle, right, the battery electric vehicle requires a lot amount of infrastructure investment, especially when it comes to countries like India, right? You require a lot more. And the levels of charging stations which are required is also a lot more, right? So, and CNG also has got the same level of restrictions, but to a certain extent with the key players in the market in India, we expect certain amount of push towards the CNG. But when you look at it from the global standpoint, CNG would be a best option for India as a subcontinent, but not as a global trend, right? So hence we are forecasting a certain level of CNG penetration for a shorter period of time. But depends again, once again, it depends on the overall CAFE standards, which would be aligned towards the climate neutral goals, right? If it's more stringent, then CNG would not be an option. And also on the other side, we can think of synthetic fuels as well, but synthetic fuels would also require a lot amount of investment into hydrogen. And to make the existing fleet, whenever I say the existing fleet, when you speak about climate neutral or greenhouse gas, it's the entire vehicles which are running in the market, right? It's not only the new passenger cars which are coming into the market. So for that kind of climate neutral goals, it might require a lot amount of emphasis into any kind of infrastructures. That's how we would put it. But the picture is so clear for Europe and for US and to a certain extent for China as well. But the picture to a certain extent for India requires a lot amount of changes to the existing regulation, such that it's quite stringently aligned with your 2030 goals, right? And to a certain extent, transportation is only 13%. That's another key takeaway for India market here.
Lastly, Vijay, it briefly touched upon e-fuels. Synthetic fuels. What's the scope you see? I mean, right now they are more of, like, say, fashionable topics. So as someone said regarding hydrogen to talk about, but when it comes to practicality, it's still some time away. Do you subscribe to that viewpoint?
Yeah, in terms of hydrogen, right? If you look at hydrogen, there are two ways you could look at hydrogen. One, hydrogen being used as a hydrogen, compressed hydrogen inside your vehicle, right? As a fuel cell vehicle, right? That is one of an option which certain car manufacturers are pronouncing more, but to a certain extent, that's not going to be cheaper, right? And once again, that's not going to be available immediately for a market like India, right? That's still going to be in an infant stage in terms of penetration into the market. But if you look hydrogen from the infrastructure standpoint, right, either it's an electric vehicle or it's any other kind of modality of transport, you still require hydrogen to clean the grid. Whenever I'm speaking about cleaning the grid, right, where do you whenever you build your infrastructure, if you want to make a clean electric vehicle, whenever I speak about clean electric vehicle on a whole life cycle based approach, if you want to make a battery electric vehicle a zero, you still require a hydrogen infrastructure or a carbon capture device, such that even if the power generation is coming from coal, that carbon emission is captured somehow, either by means of hydrogen or green hydrogen or gray hydrogen, or to a certain extent by carbon capture devices, right? That's going to be there. But when that step is going to be taken by all the key markets and to a certain extent by India, all depends on investment and infrastructure. And to a certain extent, that investment and infrastructure, I don't see that happening quite shortly. No, not in this decade until 2030. Probably it would start somewhere in 2035 to 2040 and beyond as well. And we don't currently look into that in detail when it comes to that level, because for India market, you still haven't got your 2050 or 2060 alignment yet, right? So.
Thanks, Vijay. You shared your thoughts and your viewpoints very clearly and crisply with us on a very topics related to carbon neutrality. The industry is drive towards carbon neutrality. But lastly, overall, the thing, the auto industry is now set to play a much more stronger role than it has ever played in terms of helping the Earth tackle its climate challenge.
Yes, definitely. Of course, it's a good question over here, right? Automotive have been and also will be a key contributor when it comes to climate neutrality, because in terms of the contribution from the auto industry or from the entire transportation sector, 25%, right, on an average, 25% is a contribution. But when you look at it from the supply chain standpoint, it's much more. And if you look at the sustainability thinking, which is currently being practiced within automotive and also the entire supply chain, we are making more amount of strategic moves to approach the common goal, or to meet the common goal of climate neutral. Right? It's not only the automotive industry which is working towards it; it's also the entire automotive supply chain is working towards it, to make everything green as much as possible, and to bring the CO2 levels to the required levels, such that the climate pledges are met, and make a sustainable environment as an overall goal. So that would be always there from transportation and from the automotive sector, right? And that would be the key contributor in this space, and there's no doubt about it.
Great. On that note, Vijay, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on this podcast. Viewers, that was Vijay Subramanian, Global Director, CO2 Compliance, Cost and Powertrain Forecasting at IHS Markit. Thank you very much for watching this podcast.